Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and we're back with Real Reviews Rewind, the show where we talk about movies and we rewind the clock and talk about older films. But this week, we're changing it up. Folks, it's Oscar season time, and you know what that means. It means that we are going to be greedily looking at every single Oscar pick there is. No, not every single one.
I was going to say,
but,
you're scaring me.
But just two
Okay.
that might be on the Oscar ballot for Best Picture this year. First Man, directed by Damien Chazelle. And then we're also going to look at Widows by Steve McQueen. So the first film I want to talk about is, ironically, First Man, directed and written by Damien Chazelle with music by Justin Hurwitz, starring the man Ryan Gosling and Claire Foy, as well as Kyle Chandler is in this as well. And there's another guy, Corey Stoll, who's also in the film as well. It centers around the lead up to our very first mission to the moon. And we have Neil Armstrong and his wife Janet and their kids. And you basically get to see from a third-person perspective what it was like for the most famous astronaut we all know of to prepare and train for the first moon mission. So here's what I thought about the film. Essentially, there's a huge chunk of it I did like, which would be everything involving the training leading up to the mission and the initial failures and successes as they occurred. Everything that I didn't like, the press conferences, not spending enough time with Janet Armstrong, not really getting to know what the culture of everything was like as an astronaut. They kind of like blew past that for me. Do I think it's a worthy film to see? Absolutely. Ryan Gosling gives a heartbreaking performance as Neil Armstrong. He is the definition in this film of a strong, silent type. And when he gets emotional, which happens quite often in different varying degrees of severity or lightness, it's very impactful and makes for compelling watching. Sanford, what did you think of First Man?
Well, I'm not sure I agree about Ryan Gosling's performance because to me, I usually am underwhelmed by Ryan Gosling. He does not show a lot of range of emotion usually. And in some of his films, he has almost no emotion. In this film, it kind of works because the person he's playing seems to be a very repressed and sort of controlled guy, keeps everything in. That's his personality type.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that he really got emotional that often. I think, even when he deals with a situation as horrendous as the death of their daughter, he's still very tightly repressed and doesn't really show much. And again, this, I would say, one of the few times, though, where Ryan Gosling's sort of repressed mentality is okay in the role. But I didn't really feel a lot for his character. I felt a lot more for his wife, and I agree with you. Now, when you say you don't think that they not spending enough time with his wife, Janet, do you mean that you want the movie to focus more on her character, or you would like Neil Armstrong to spend more time with his wife, Janet?
More time with the character of Janet and the neighbors. What was that dynamic like? Because we never really saw her worrying with the neighbors whose husbands were also astronauts in the same housing block.
Right.
We never saw any of that worry communicated through anyone else.
So I agree with that part, because to me, where this movie, it didn't spend enough time developing them as people. It spent a lot of time telling the story, but we didn't get really that kind of chance to grow to understand who these people were, and especially a lot of the other astronauts were very one-dimensional characters.
Yeah.
We just kind of...
Except for one.
His buddy who kind of a loudmouth?
Ed, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, even he kind of felt one-dimensional to me.
He felt like a 50s Leave It to Beaver kind of good old boy, but he I found charming and endearing, so when he died, it actually meant a little bit to me.
Yeah, I mean, he stood out a little bit more. But I mean, for example, some of the other guys who he was interacting with, the one who was, you're right about. Let me say this. What I thought I liked about this movie the most was the flight scenes and the training scenes, like you referenced. I really liked the way that Damien Chazelle shot the scenes, especially when things were going wrong in the cockpit. Now, I will say this: it's kind of a shaky cam kind of effect.
Yes, very
So
much so.
for anybody who has a hard time watching, some people have a problem watching movies like that.
Yeah, epilepsy can come from that.
Yeah, but the scenes are told very effectively, and the use of the shaky cam is excellent for giving you a perspective of what these people are going through and how, making decisions through that sort of fog of awareness or lack of awareness, it must be so difficult, both in the training scenes and in some of his flight test scenes early in the movie. I just really liked the way that he did that. So
I agree.
And I liked, I think that the excitement of the story is huge.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like this movie motored along. Now, it had a lot of plot to tell, or at least it spanned a long time.
Yeah.
Probably they could have reduced some of the series of events that they showed. They spent a lot of time on some of his early flights.
Yeah.
And given more of that time to developing the characters. Or you kind of take the approach, have you ever seen The Right Stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so The Right Stuff covered similar territorial that was more about the original batch of astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like 3 hours long. So when you have this kind of a large movie with lots of stories, that's one of those times
Pick and
where...
choose them.
Pick and choose, or take your time and tell more.
And in that remark I will say, this movie should not have been called First Man. It should have been called The Space Program. That way everybody could have had a little small bit of a focus, and then you would have lost no one in the fact that you're trying to tell Neil's story and just Neil's story.
Right.
Because everybody else in that film, including his own wife, feels like an after effect.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I mean, this movie made a sort of conscious decision to tell one person's story.
Mm-hmm.
Just again, when I walked out of the movie, I was thinking a lot about The Right Stuff. And The Right Stuff was really trying to tell the story of, I think it was like 8 or 9 people, if you can count Chuck Yeager as well. They were counting a larger group of people in the characters and sort of evenly distributing it. This is focused on Neil Armstrong. And at times it makes it seem like, the whole space program is about him.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, as they sort of allude to in the movie, he may not have even been in the first trip to the moon were there not that fire in one of the tests.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like, okay, if you're going to tell a story about one person, that person better be really interesting. And Neil Armstrong as a person in this movie is kind of not that interesting. I mean, events occur to him, sure, exciting events occur to him.
Mm-hmm.
But as a character, he's kind of blah.
So, in the end, like or dislike this film?
Liked it. I liked it a lot more as a, again, a sort of space movie, an astronaut movie. I would not, if Oscar was going to come calling, I wouldn't think that Ryan Gosling... I could support a Best Supporting Actress for Clara Foy, who played his wife. I thought she was really good. I really... so let's talk about her for a second. I thought her performance was really strong in the sense of giving you a sense of the anxiety that an astronaut's wife has got to go through. I mean, during the time that he's on the launch pad, he's up in the air, but even just interacting with other families, as you alluded to, they're all in the same block, and deaths and accidents happen. So here, that's an ever-present risk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Early in the movie, one of the characters dies, not even in an astronaut event, just flying back to the base from their home.
Mm-hmm.
So I really liked the human quality that she brought to the film in just making you feel something for a character, which, again, Ryan Gosling just doesn't bring that to me.
I like this film quite a bit.
Okay. Sorry.
We both had the same problems with the lack of character development. And the idea that, there are different characters who could have deserved more of their story being told as an equal to Neil, since Neil was at least portrayed by Ryan Gosling as plain. But in my opinion, it did work for him. And like you said, it rarely works in the movies he has. Like
That's my take.
There's this in Blue Valentine and Drive. They're the only other two movies where I can think of him being such a one-note.
Right. Yeah, Drive is another great example. It works in Drive. I mean, he is fabulous in that because he is so monotone.
Right.
But
so
outside, I mean, I'm thinking like La La Land. Damien Chazelle seems to like Ryan Gosling, but in La La Land, he was such a non-entity. I'm sorry if I'm just touching a nerve on that one.
You're not touching that much of a nerve because we both can agree that Emma Stone was better.
So much better.
Yeah.
So much better.
So,
all right, I have one more comment about First Man.
Go ahead.
So I liked this movie more until the ending. I really did not like where the director chose to end this movie.
The ending was ridiculous.
Yeah, so first of all, please give me at least your interpretation. And sorry for the plot spoiler, but he goes to the moon and comes back. So there's the plot spoiler. The final scene of the movie is a scene between him and his wife where he's still in quarantine and there's a glass wall between them. And I watched that scene and just said, this doesn't seem like two humans interacting.
I think that's the entire point.
So tell me your interpretation of why he did that, why the director did that.
I think that Damien Chazelle was either smart enough or stupid enough to believe that that was the best way to end the film, in the sense of you're looking at the separation, the man from the moon versus the woman from Earth, essentially. And he has an experience he's never going to be able to vocalize to her. And her panic and her fear about whether he was going to live or not was never going to be vocalized to him.
Right.
So you're at this really weird, uneven balance between a man who's been to another world and a woman who thinks that that man belongs on Earth with him because he's missed out on so much.
So I agree with you about, I think that's a reasonable interpretation, but why with the start of the scene is she comes in and she seems devoid of emotion too, which is completely out of character for the way she's been the rest of the movie.
Wouldn't you be after your husband? That happened so many times where he was almost dead. Wouldn't you be like, I have nothing left?
I don't know. I would think that she would be a sense of, I'm happy to see you, there's so much relief. But you're right. That's the way that
But that's the cheery way to go about it, though. That's the happy Hollywood ending. That's not what would be realistic within an emotional set. Your husband spent 5-6 years of his life in this program trying to get this to work. He finally pulls it off. But you seriously feel like you're about to have a heart attack every second that you see him and that you know he's back? Aren't you just gonna be like, you did it, but...
apparently that's how they chose to play it. But for me, I don't know. And, I don't need a Hollywood ending per se, but I guess I wanted more in the ending, more resonance. Because when I walked out of the theater at the end of this, I was just kind of like, blah, which after such a movie of emotional highs and lows was kind of a weird way to leave it. I would even have accepted a much more downbeat ending where maybe, she's trying to be warm and he can't relate to her because he's had such this incredible experience and, he's unable to sort of be an Earth person again.
I know what I would have accepted.
Okay.
If while he's there, he goes to a desk, writes on a piece of paper that it was for his daughter that died of the brain tumor.
Yeah.
Then I'd be like, oh, fair, good move.
Okay.
But since that didn't happen, I was just like, okay, I officially don't care. I like this movie, but I don't care about anything you're feeling right now. What I care about is the fact that you went through all this other stuff.
Well, and, yeah. So I would have accepted a lot of different endings, too. I would have accepted an ending without that scene.
And you would have just ended it where they landed, and that's it?
For them, they landed, and and yeah, landed, and that's it. I mean, why not? It's the story of him going to the moon. So he's gone to the moon, he's come home, and the movie. I don't know. Again, that was for me. That was probably the biggest disappointment of the film was the last 2 minutes.
There's so many other disappointments that you could name, and you went with that one. All right.
Oh.
I mean, him breaking the wine glass when he finds out his friends died is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The way he doesn't really parent at all throughout the film is ridiculous.
It was the 60s. Come on.
Oh, you're going to cut him break now? All right.
No,
fine.
I'm not cutting him a break. I'm just saying that actually might be realistic because it was a different time. That was,
All right. I'll give it to you. Let's move on to our second film.
Okay.
The latest from Steve McQueen. Now, I don't believe you reviewed a Steve McQueen film with me on this program before.
We've only been doing it since January, so
no,
I don't
we
think
have not.
I don't think so.
The last time our viewers will have seen me review a Steve McQueen film was with 2013's 12 Years a Slave. This is Steve McQueen's 5-year follow-up, Widows, directed by Steve McQueen, written by Gillian Flynn, based on a book by Linda LaPlante. And Widows surrounds 4 widows of men who are pretty obviously bank robbers or criminals of some repute, who all perish during their latest gig. And once they perish, Viola Davis's character has to pay back the money that she owes to a man who is running for alderman, and the person who is pursuing her for that payback isn't even the alderman, it's the alderman's brother. And then you've got the politics of Colin Farrell's legacy family with Robert Duvall, who's running against that same man for alderman, and the different dynamics within.
Describing this movie has got to be very difficult. Chike did a great job at that, but there are a lot of threads going on in this movie.
I'm not even touching on the other women in this film yet.
Right.
So you've got Michelle Rodriguez, who is a dress shop owner who has made the money to actually have the dress shop by her now deceased husband. You have
DeBecky, her last name is?
The character's name is not going to be familiar, but her first name is Elizabeth Debicki, the actress.
Right.
And she has a boyfriend played by John Bernthal of The Walking Dead and the Punisher series, who always beats her up right before a job, but is a kind, sweet man afterwards. Reminds you of the cycle of domestic violence, for sure. And she's trying to put the pieces back together of her own life when her mother is suggesting she become not exactly, a high-class prostitute. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
And the 4 women are...
Well, then the 4th woman is sort of not really, they don't go into her too much.
The 4th woman's not even really involved in any of this.
Yeah.
So Viola Davis gives what I'm only going to argue is her best performance to date. If she does not get the Best Leading Actress Oscar for this film, I will be upset. And there also needs to be a second Oscar for that little white dog that is with her throughout the entire film. So here's the thing. I hated this movie.
Wow.
Initially.
Okay.
And the reason I hated this movie is because I know that Steve McQueen excels at a specific type of movie. If you go back and look at his other filmic works, the cinematic works of Steve McQueen, you will find a theme of what I like to term as misery porn. Meaning a bad thing happens, then on top of a bad thing, another bad thing happens. And then you watch this other person get beat up. And then this happens that's horrible. And that whole through line continues throughout the entire film. That is definitely true with 12 Years a Slave. All pain, no hope. But what makes me like 12 Years a Slave is the same reason why I ended up eventually liking Widows. It's the characters and the stories and the fact that these people feel like real people who you could meet on the street at any given time. Steve McQueen is a master director, in my opinion. He really knows how to work a camera and take you to different focal points, showing you different things that really kind of... They don't play with your imagination like some fantasy directors. They show you realism in real time as honestly as it can be told. The first thing we see in this film, before we see any of the crazy action, is a heavy makeout scene between Liam Neeson and Viola Davis. And you're sitting there uncomfortable, but you're also thinking to yourself, dang, these two must really be in love. That comes into play later. But overall, I thought this film was phenomenal. Specifically...
You came around that far.
Specifically because of the scene involving the car.
Which scene involving the car?
Well, actually, there's two.
There's lots of cars, yeah.
I should be very specific. The scene involving Colin Farrell getting into a car.
Oh, with his... Yeah,
with his aide.
Yes.
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And something that made my sociology heart very, very happy. Sanford, what did you think of Widows?
I want to say thank you for having me see this movie, because I was not a fan of seeing this movie. When Chike told me he wanted to talk about Widows, all I had seen was the preview. And I will say that the preview, to me, takes the absolute wrong approach to sell this movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely does. Go ahead.
I totally agree with you that, first of all, this movie does unlike First Man, and almost in a way the opposite side of the approach, does such a great job with developing these characters. You really actually feel like, even though there are lots of characters in this movie, you feel like you actually understand or have a relationship with each of them. You have, and with a couple of exceptions, you have multiple angles to those characters. Colin Farrell's character is a great example of this.
Speech in the Office.
Yeah, the scene you're alluding to is an amazing scene that is told from an interesting vantage point because, they get in the car, but the scene, while the dialogue occurs, doesn't show them talking. It's really just showing the hood of the car. That during that whole dialogue, you're not seeing them. You're hearing the conversation. And then the car arrives. Oh, hello. Someone's getting a call.
And that is bizarre.
That's all right. So then the car arrives and the camera kind of pans to the other side of the hood, and then they get out. And what a great scene! What a fabulous scene, but told with no need to show us the characters.
I agree.
I also love the point of view and the camera work. I don't know. You saw it in the theater, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanksgiving Day, actually.
So he had this, Steve McQueen had the little preview before, says, thank you for coming to see the movies, says, this has been a passion project my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I kind of rode that sentence into the first scene, which you alluded to is this sort of heavy makeout session.
Yeah.
But then jumps right into and sort of intercuts with the heist, the caper that's gone wrong. The way that is shot. Like, for example, the opening shot is from the inside of the van out as the people are jumping into the van's driving away. Just brilliantly planned and plotted, and the vision and the direction that you're getting, the perspective was amazing. And throughout the movie, there were shots like that just made me go, wow. That was genius. That one little shot, and like you alluded to, that one scene, this angle or the way he shoots something was just fabulous. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say the reason I was kind of uncertain about this movie,
movie.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I didn't like the movie, actually, the parts of the movie I didn't like was actually Viola Davis's scenes where she's like the leader of the crew.
Oh yeah. I buy that. Go ahead.
I think the number one reason I didn't want to see this based on the trailer was the end line of the trailer, which is this cheesy line.
What's the line?
They didn't think we'd have the balls to pull this off.
But the way it's used in the film...
The way they use it in the film is better.
Is great.
Than the way they use it in the trailer. But It did. It was just like one of those, oh, God, what a cheesy line. And in general, the scenes where I just, again, he does such a wonderful job putting relatively real people on the screen that the scenes where she's just like, hey, all of a sudden we're a criminal gang. I know you don't know how to do anything, but go buy us 3 guns. I know you don't know how to do anything, but here, go find out where this property is located. It's like, what? It doesn't work like that, So those couple of sort of the planning and heist scenes, not my favorite parts of the movie. But that's a small criticism.
So the reason I ended up originally not liking this film, for those of you who have pets, turn your television sets off now.
Well, mute your television.
Or mute it. They literally have a bruiser of a man, not beat up by Viola Davis.
Right.
Grab the dog by the neck and almost seem like it's going to choke the dog. Like, for the entire movie, I was just on pins and needles about that dog.
The dog, that dog was constantly under threat. Absolutely.
Like,
which is why she brought it everywhere, you assume, right?
Well, I didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, the dog gets almost choked out, and then I didn't start breathing normally until that dog was checked into a doggy hotel. Because I was just like, I can finally breathe. You can kill literally everybody in the movie, and I'll be fine. It's okay, because the dog is safe. I literally couldn't handle that. But things I liked about this movie, very quickly. Robert Duvall, who doesn't really get much to say in the film, but the gravitas and weight with which he wields the words he has is a phenomenal performance from such a actor in a late stage of his career. Specifically, the scene he had with his son, where the son readily admits,
right,
Dad, I don't want to do this.
Right.
You're making me do this.
His scenes with Colin Farrell, I mean, there were 2 or 3 of them that were fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And Colin Farrell, I really liked his performance. I thought he was really nuanced. Mm-hmm. There were scenes where he was this slick politician, and there were scenes where he opened up and he, you sort of understood that there was a completely different side to this character.
I so wanted to see his face when he won, though. Just so I could see I didn't want to win.
Yeah, that was interesting how they kind of told the story at the end. That was an effective way to do it.
Speaking of which, I want to very quickly rush to the heist itself.
Okay.
There's not really that much notable about the heist.
Right.
But there's a specific little twist that happens toward the end of the heist that even I was like, oh crap, that would have been so simple if I had just thought of that. Like, why would you not do the thing that they did?
Which thing?
Multiple cars.
Oh, multiple cars? Okay.
Yeah. I thought that was just lovely.
Yeah.
And I was like, that makes it so simple. And the crying scene Viola has earlier on, when she's kind of not in mourning, but
reminded of being in mourning. Yeah.
And then the fact of there's another flashback we see of an emotionally important incident. You might argue that this whole storyline section wasn't necessary, but when she's actually
no, I would
talking about her son.
Yeah.
And we're trying to think about
Marcus, right?
Marcus, what does it mean? And then we're finally shown what happens, and it's done in such a matter-of-fact, cold, hard truth manner. There is no brief second of hesitation with what happens to Marcus. It just happens and it's over. And like the audience in the room, I was just like, damn, I have to accept that's the reality.
Yeah. I thought her scenes by herself were excellent. I mean, that's really tough because there were chunks of the film, I mean, probably a couple minutes worth of the film, where it's truly the camera is just on her, she's all by herself, and she's emoting silently. You know, getting ready for the funeral, or having these flashbacks, or, and I didn't feel like there was any waste in the story of her son, because it actually really helped to put together her relationship with her husband, Liam Neeson.
Which you can now tell was kind of more bitter than we imagined it would
Right.
be when it was loving. When
Right.
it was loving, I'm going to guess that the son was alive?
No, I think that was
passion.
I think that was just before the passion just before he goes off to do the caper.
The caper that he loses.
Yeah. Now I have one for you, real fast.
Okay.
One of my complaints about this movie
Yes.
is the Manning brothers.
Okay.
I thought that the one running for office was a more defined character, but his brother, who's more heavy, I didn't. He was kind of a one-note character. And then the one thing that really drove me crazy about this movie is this idea that a guy who's sort of a major bad guy with his brother running for alderman office is going to spend so much of the movie in his car tailing Viola Davis. I just didn't buy that fact. I didn't buy that plot.
I would say the time would have been better spent tracking the money that the alderman had.
Yeah.
Or, keeping things clean and quiet so the guy could have a clean victory.
Yeah.
But, okay.
So I don't know. What did you think of the Manning brothers?
If we're talking about Daniel Kaluuya's character, yes, he was one note, but he was much like the Joker. You didn't see him much, but when you did see him, he made a big impact.
Yeah.
As for the elder alderman, the only time that man was intimidating was when he was having that scene with the Reverend, which I'm not going to get into.
Oh, I think he was very intimidating to Viola Davis. I thought he was excellent in that scene. With the dog?
Well, yeah. With the dog, yes, but beyond...
Yeah, his scene with the Reverend was good.
The scene with the Reverend is the only other one I can point to, those two scenes.
Yeah, I guess I kind of felt like, almost to a certain extent, his character fell off too much, and I thought that they spent too much time with Daniel Kaluuya, because I really didn't get into his character. I wanted, or how about this? I would have really appreciated another level of depth, even some more scenes with Daniel Kaluuya, to sort of explain where he's coming from. Why is he so
I want to know why that
psychopathic?
guy's running for alderman. Does he just not like the legacy? Like,
Well,
what was his upbringing within the ward he so much wants to run? Those are the questions I would have wanted answered, but there wasn't enough time for that, just like there's not enough time in our show. But overall, did you like Widows?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
People to see
Strong recommendation. And, I can completely see this one up for Best Picture, especially due to both the direction and the cast of characters and the storylines.
I hope that Viola Davis gets her Oscar and that Mr. Steve McQueen gets his. I don't know if he got one for 12 Years a Slave, but he definitely deserves one for this. So next week we'll be looking at some other films. I do maybe eventually want to see Suspiria with you. The 2018, not the original, and see how we both survived that film. Because as you know, I'm not a fan of horror at all. So we will see what happens. We will see you either next week or the following week for another edition of Real Reviews Rewind, where we will take a look at rewinding the clock back, looking at older movies. I'm Chike Coleman. That's Sanford S. We'll see you at the movies. Bye, guys.